The race to dethrone Tartarus was a brutal one, with many contenders for the number 1 spot above it, but one of these top ones stood out from the rest, and that was Abyss of Darkness. Abyss of Darkness was by far harder than pretty much any other upcoming top 1 at the time, and in its old state probably would still place in the top 3 today. This version of Abyss of Darkness was of course never verified, as the redecoration was quickly verified by Cursed. Months before that, a player by the name of Dils Thik had gotten 98% twice on the old version of AOD. So what if Dils Thik prevailed and verified Abyss of Darkness? It turns out this has a lot more ripple effects than you would think. The way I see it, there's 2 possible ways this could have gone down. Either 1, Dils Thik's second 98% fail actually succeeds, and he verifies the old version of AOD, or he still dies at 98% the second time, and then is just set as the set verifier of the redecoration instead of having it be an open verification, and Dils has the determination to beat it as quickly as possible, making very quick work of it. So today we're going to go over scenario 1 and then scenario 2, starting with the old AOD scenario. Starting with scenario 1, on the 11th of August 2021, Dils Thik verifies old Abyss of Darkness. In our timeline, of course, he ended up dying at 98%, despite the fact he was pretty confident he would beat it a few days afterwards, but he ended up beating it in this timeline. Immediately panic sets in, as it's possible that Tartarus has finally been dethroned. There had been rumors that Arcturus was harder than Tartarus already, but no one likes that level, so we just kind of glazed over it. And plus, it was even contested if it was harder than Tartarus or not. However, AOD is clearly not only harder than Tartarus, but harder than many of the upcoming top ones at the time. Drama surrounding whether the level deserved a star rate or not would immediately ensue, sparking probably one of the largest controversies in the game. My assumption is that this drama would very much reflect how the tidal wave rate drama went down in our timeline, but most likely even more intense, as the people advocating against for AOD's rate can point to a wider variety of things wrong with the level than tidal wave, you know, because it looks like dog shit. But there would also be a lot of people who really wanted it rated just because Tartarus was at the time the longest running top 1 in Geometry history. Unless you count the whole golden stuff, we don't talk about that. There would probably be an incredible amount of pressure on RobTop to rate Abyss of Darkness as well as Arcturus, as there was in our timeline. But remember, RobTop didn't rate Arcturus, Slaughterhouse, and Firework on the same day until Firework was verified. Some people have speculated, especially around the time that this happened, that RobTop most likely did this because he wanted the top 1 to not have a Nong. Firework doesn't use a Nong, and it's possible that he wanted, the face of the community to not be a level with a song you have to download outside of the game. With the subpart decoration of both Abyss of Darkness and Arcturus, it's possible neither of these would have been rated until another top 1 was also verified, in which Rob would finally cave and rate all 3 of them at the same time. At this time, Firework and AOD were very much in a race to become the level to dethrone Tartarus, before Slaughterhouse came out of nowhere because a little someone who was a little British and a little bit of a hacker decided he wanted to be famous. Chick very much wanted Firework to be the next top 1, but also acknowledged that Abyss of Darkness was probably way harder and did buff Firework in order to try to meet that. So in this timeline, he probably would have significantly buffed Firework even more, meaning it would be even longer before the level came out. I think what's more likely is that if this level was rated, it would be when Slaughterhouse releases, because it doesn't matter how hard Slaughterhouse is when it releases, it would probably release around the same time regardless, because spaceuk hacked. My guess is that spaceuk would have buffed Slaughterhouse to be harder than old Abyss of Darkness, and quote-unquote verified it around the same time that he did in our timeline, pressuring Rob finally enough to rate Slaughterhouse, Abyss of Darkness, and Arcturus. However, Abyss of Darkness was already a huge jump in difficulty from Tartarus, and even from Arcturus or Firework for that matter. This would probably lead to lots more scrutiny surrounding spaceuk's completion of Slaughterhouse, until eventually the Demonless team would find that, of course, he hacked the level. So while it's possible that during this confusion Slaughterhouse was at the number 1 spot for a brief amount of time, it would inevitably be unrated, spaceuk would have gotten caught way earlier, and Abyss of Darkness would take the number 1 spot around November of 2021. Tartarus and Arcturus would bicker for the number 2 spot. Chances are Slaughterhouse would be passed back to Daki, who would nerf it back to its original state, and I think sakupen circles would probably be verified more or less how it was in our timeline, and placed at number 2 above Tartarus and Arcturus. So I know that's a lot and all of that is pretty crazy, but remember, we're just starting 2022 at this point. There is still 2 more years to go until our present day. All of this combined would have made for a very hectic end to 2021, with Advi getting exposed around this time, combined with all of this Demonless drama, spaceuk getting caught hacking. Like, this all would have been extremely wild. From this point, it's very difficult to predict what would have happened afterwards, as this changes everything so radically that butterfly effect has taken hold completely. Zoink has cited cited that spaceuk was one of his main inspirations for continuing with the game, it's possible he still could have become the next top player, beating or maybe even verifying Slaughterhouse, and taking a shot at silent clubstep around the middle part of 2022 just like everyone else, which I think would have also not really been affected as Vision and Zoe were pretty much doing their own thing with that level regardless of where all of this other stuff was going. My guess is that Zoink would have a lot less inspiration to become the next Giga top player, and one Alpha Helix's version of Acheron would end up being the one verified, placing below Abyss of Darkness. Silent Clubstep would become the next top one after Abyss of Darkness, finally dethroning the ugliest top one with another ugliest top one. You would bet me 2 years ago would have a field day with that one. Cursed would most likely not even be as remotely well known as he is today, as Sakupen Circles would probably draw a lot less attention as it's not an upcoming top one anymore, and of course his verification of Abyss of Darkness would have never happened. Funnily enough, because Acheron wasn't quite as difficult as it is in our timeline, and Zoink was most likely not going to become the same player that he is today without spaceuk's influence, Avernus would have either never seen the light of day or would have been nerfed, or kept at its original state, not even placing within the top 5, which would probably also be the case for Tidal Wave. Eventually, at some point, Firework would be verified by Trick as the next top one, possibly even after Silent Clubstep, and heading into 2.2, I think honestly things would have been completely different. So yeah, that is probably the craziest butterfly effect I've done in one of these videos so far. Now let's move on to scenario 2, in which Dils Thik verifies new AOD towards the very end of 2021 heading into 2022 after Slaughterhouse becomes top 1 around the same time as Sakupen Circles. I think Dils Thik would have made a lot of progress very early on with this level because new AOD is a fair bit easier than the old version. I'm just the messenger, dude, don't get mad at me. While this is after Slaughterhouse was supposedly verified, AOD would probably still be placed at number 1 like in our timeline, but just earlier. Again, this means a Diamond, Cursed, and Sakupen Circles as a level probably would have gotten nearly as much recognition as it would place at number 2 or number 3, above or below Slaughterhouse, but ultimately below New Abyss of Darkness. While there would be less rating drama around the level compared to old Abyss of Darkness, I still think there would have been at least some of it as there was in our timeline when it was verified by Cursed a few months later. But after that, things would have probably progressed rather similarly as they did to our timeline, given that pretty much the only thing this changes is that Abyss of Darkness was verified a few months earlier, and Sakupen Circles just didn't get as much recognition. As much as I would like to say something like, oh, this would have totally exposed spaceuk or something like that, I highly doubt that would have been the case around this time. However, it is possible with Dils Thik more actively in the equation that Slaughterhouse is never placed above Abyss of Darkness, meaning that there is more merit to the idea that Silent Clubstep is top 1, which of course it would have been in this scenario because it is placed above Abyss of Darkness currently. So that would be cool, but I think pretty much everything else would stay relatively the same. I doubt Dils Thik would have continued to verify harder levels than this, as it seems like he really just had a passion for Abyss of Darkness specifically, sort of in a case more alike to Novel Boy, but I personally think he probably would have thrown his hat in the ring with a few other levels, considering that 98% fails on Abyss of Darkness probably heavily demotivated him, and he did eventually later go back and beat the new version of Abyss of Darkness. However, I will say in both timelines, I don't think Cosmos would have gotten the redecoration from Cherry Team that it did, because Slaughterhouse in both of these timelines would have been top 1 for a lot less, therefore having a lot less influence on the community. So I think it's pretty likely that Cosmos would have either never been created or it just never got the traction that it did in our timeline. But yeah, that's kind of the only other thing I could think of that would pretty much significantly change if this was the scenario that we went with. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Let me know if you enjoyed this one, and I will be doing more of these in the future. I know a lot of you said that you liked all of the options on the poll, so I'll probably do the other ones next. If you did enjoy, please remember to like, subscribe. It really helps out the channel a ton, and it helps me on a personal level because the more subscribers I have, the less likely my parents will force me to work at McDonald's over the summer. If you'd like to, you can join my Discord server, you can ask me questions and stuff there, and yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.
Goodbye.